We are talking about evolution and creation and those kinds of things this morning. And right before we dive into this, there's a few things that I want to make sure that we understand before we head into this together. And first of all, this is a huge topic, enormous topic. There is no way we'll be able to cover everything in the time allotment that we have given to us this morning. There's no way that I'll be able to answer all the questions I'm sure that you have. I'm sure I'll say some things that may have come to news to you. So I'll probably say some things that you already know, and there will be some things I don't say that you wish I would have, and there will be some questions I don't answer that you wish we would have. It's that big of a topic, and as I will do at the end of the service, I challenge you to do research on your own, and the things that you're going to hear this morning, take the opportunity to dig into these things yourself. But this morning we're just going to be able to hit the highlights. I think, though, when we're done, you will see a convincing answer to the question of what's the deal with evolution. The other thing I want to say is we're not going to attack evolution this morning. I'm assuming that you're assuming that in this whole argument of evolution and creation, that you're assuming that as a church we're going to come down on the side of God created this. Right? I would assume that would be your assumption. That's a correct assumption. I do believe that God created the earth, the heavens, the universe. And as a church, that's what we believe. That's what we affirm. And so given that, though, we're not going to attack or poke fun or put down those who may believe differently or who are not sure what they believe. And we're just going to look at the evidence naturally, logically, and let the evidence lead us in the direction that we think that is logical and makes the most sense. And I believe that will be convincing enough. So what's the deal with evolution? You may not even be asking that question. You might be wondering why we're even talking about this, because in your mind, you think you already have the answer, or maybe you don't want to know, you don't think you need to know. Why is it important that we talk about this? And why is it important that you hear this and understand this? Well, it's important, first of all, because you need to know not just what you believe, but you need to know why you believe what you believe. Whatever it is you believe, you need to know why you believe it. Someone also may ask you a question sometime, and they might be in process or in struggle. And they say, hey, what about this? What about that? And you need to be able to at least guide a conversation to where you can help them find the answers that you have found and are finding. But I think probably the biggest reason you need to perk up and pay attention this morning is that everything we're going to talk about this morning, even though it's going to come across as very academic, and there's going to be a lot of terms, it's going to seem very scientific, and at times it's going to feel like a classroom, which is kind of an odd feel for this room, because we usually try to avoid that kind of presentation, but there's no way to avoid that with all of the things we need to talk about this morning. Even with all of that, this is really a spiritual issue. And because it's a spiritual issue, you need to be aware of the implications of this question. And we'll get to that at the end as well. So what's the issue on the table? How do you explain the universe? Did God create the universe and this world? Did he speak it into existence? Or is the universe a result of some evolutionary process? The Bible says in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, is that true? I believe it is. As a church, we believe it is. And I think it's interesting that at the very beginning of the Bible, the very first thing God wanted us to know about his story, the very first thing God wanted us to know about our story, and how our story relates to his story, and how we are a part of what he's doing, the very first thing he wants us to know in telling us anything is, you need to know that in the beginning, I created everything. John chapter 1 verse 3 echoes this. He created everything there is. Nothing exists that he didn't make. If you see it, God is responsible for it. Even the things that we create, even the things that we make, ultimately we have the ability to create because of him. And everything you see, if you trace it back far enough, it will lead you to God. Ultimately, he's responsible for everything that there is. And the evidence is so overwhelming. And I believe the evidence, when you look at it fairly and logically and naturally, supports that. And we'll look at it this morning. But before we jump into the evidence, let me say this. This may come as a shock to you. But neither evolution or creation can be proven to be true scientifically. Both require faith. That's right. Neither evolution or creation can be proven to be true scientifically according to the rules of science. They have to be accepted by faith. Now, let me explain what I mean. In 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, somewhere along those lines, you learned and I learned in physical science about the scientific method, correct? That's the scientific method, is the method by which we prove things are true scientifically or false scientifically. We start with a hypothesis, and then when you have this hypothesis where you say, oh, I think this is going to happen, then these are the 4 things that the scientific method says must be true in order for something to be proven scientific fact. Number 1, it must be observable. Number 2, it must be measurable. Number 3, it must be recordable. And fourthly, it must be repeatable. If you can observe it, measure it, record it, and repeat that process over and over and over and over again, then you can conclude this is a scientific fact. This is scientifically true. If I take this book and I let go, we have something called the law of gravity. How do we know the law of gravity is a scientific fact? Because you can observe, when I let it go, what? It's going to fall to the stage. It's going to drop. We can observe that. And you could measure it too. You could measure the distance between the book and the floor. And you could measure through formulas the velocity, the rate at which it falls. And then you could record all of that and then repeat it. Every time I let it go, it's going to do the same thing, the same way, every single time over and over again, unless another force of energy acts on it or changes its direction or something else changes in the formula. If everything is the same, it's going to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And you can prove that to be scientifically true. It supports the law of gravity. Evolution cannot be proven to be scientifically true. First of all, you can't observe the full evolutionary process. It just can't be observed fully. Why? Because they say, evolutionists say, it took billions of years to happen. And I know that some of you are old, but you're not that old, okay? None of us have been around that long to watch the whole thing and to observe the whole thing. And even the minute parts of evolution and the evolutionary process, they say it takes millions of years. Well, unfortunately, we can't hang around long enough we could only videotape the last 75 years of what, so... And if you can't observe it, you can't measure it. And if you can't measure it, you can't record it. Now, it has been recorded. The theory of evolution has been recorded in books. But you're going to have to accept that as true or not by faith. And you certainly can't repeat it because you can't be around to see it completed at the very beginning. So you will accept evolution. If you accept it, you will accept it by faith. You just have to take somebody else's word for it.